Okay. It's silly. I'm pulling up my introduction to introduce our next speaker, but I shouldn't have to because our next speaker, Ryan Slabaugh, is one I know very well. We worked closely together for over 6 years at Acres USA. And in 2023, he founded his own organization, Think Regeneration, a nonprofit empowering farmers, ranchers, and executives to accelerate regenerative change through leadership training and workforce development programs. Prior to this year, Ryan served as executive director of, hi Ryan, executive director of Acres USA, where he supported the education of thousands of farmers through various programs, including events, online learning, the Tractor Time podcast, book publishing, and a monthly magazine. Today, Ryan will speak to agriculture and its ability to transition to non-linear thinking. Please welcome Ryan.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a very warm welcome, and I appreciate the chance to talk today. So, Sarah did a wonderful job of setting me up with her presentation overall. So, we didn't even practice that in reality. So, I think the goal today is to really talk about the mindset that we're taking into the regenerative movement, and to talk about the way we communicate the goals. John Kemp did a wonderful job early on of talking about how this is much bigger than just the farming practices, even though those are still very important. Wanted to take us on a little bit of a journey here. We're going to attempt to talk about economic pressures and history and math. We're going to disassemble and reassemble the way we think about agriculture. I hope you come out of this with some ideas of ways you can communicate what we're doing, what we're talking about. Because when it comes to the regenerative movement, it's just so essential that we provide the world a real clear picture and a true value of what you guys are producing in the fields. One that goes beyond yields and includes community, health, farmer empowerment, a lot of topics we've already talked about today, really sustainability in a much grander vision. First, I want to thank the event organizers for the chance to do this, and I really appreciate it as we are a new organization. But we are going to ask today, can we switch to nonlinear thinking? So the short answer is yes. Just want to get that out of the way. We can move on really quickly from that because that is the basis of this entire presentation. Again, my name is Ryan. Sarah did a wonderful job of introducing me. I'll have contact information up at the end. A little bit about Think Regeneration and why we're talking about this today through our organizational lens. We're doing some coaching programs on the ground now. We'll be in Spokane, Washington, Tanya's backyard here, coming up here, working with the Conservation District on a 2-day leadership program with their biological farmers. We're working on organizing fundraising around a think tank to create that real picture that Sarah was mentioning about the missing pieces that would create more food hubs and food co-ops that can serve local food into more regenerative community systems. We'll also be participating with the TOP program this summer around the Midwest and helping get workforce development programs off the ground. You can learn more about our website as well, about which we have a lot of resources available for you guys as well, including some Farm Bill recommendations from input organizations around the country. That's a big year and it's going to be a big topic this year. So what will show up there? Notes. The genesis of this presentation came from a rancher in Kentucky. Her name is Kate, and she told me over the phone recently when we were talking about the goals of the organization. She said, regenerative math is different than conventional math. And she said it very succinctly. She was starting her ranch. She started in 2016. Immediately, she was kind of told she was crazy. The land was going to be impossible to restore and that she was about to be broke. And that might sound familiar. The alternative, and she was really trying to weigh the alternatives, like, where do I go from here? It was a math that she really didn't feel comfortable with. She was going to move in the path of large industry. She knew she didn't want to compete in the get big or get out mindset. It's one her economics didn't support, her goals didn't support. The reasons she left corporate America to buy her ranch didn't support this. The math, frankly, didn't really work for her. The only option she saw that was being recommended was more decorative practices and more cheap food for the masses. And that was the only way to enter the economy. And she wondered, like, she came from $1 billion company and she was trying to figure out, how did we get here? How is innovation so hard in an industry that really depends on it? And how can we remove the barriers that Sarah brought up to allow different paths into agriculture and a more diverse set of farmers that are fueling our food supply? She really didn't understand it. And that's what we're still exploring today through this movement. But there's a real reason why you guys are feeling some friction and some challenges, and the policy side is one of them. I don't know how many people are familiar with the adaptive program for agriculture, but we got here today by intent. This is not happenstance. A little bit of background. In the 1940s, we began exporting food at a massive scale to support Europe during World War II. By the early 1960s, Europe's economy was coming back online, and the larger industries in the US were losing a foothold. So naturally, they blamed farmers, right? In 1962, a group of industrial CEOs created a think tank through the Center for Economic Development and named their recommendations the Adaptive Ag Program, which fundamentally steered millions out of our rural communities, millions of people away from agriculture and into the factories and universities that drove their industries. This is a document that still fuels our policy today and still fuels the thinking around how we can compete globally with our food supplies. Highlighted one quote on this slide that stops me every time. We are recommending many governmental activities here that we usually regard as inappropriate. They were manipulating the market so much. I never do that word very well. They did not want them to do the same things to their own industry, right? They wouldn't stand for it, but they did it to agriculture and they did it to farmers, and we're still dealing with that today. From the report, although the exodus from agriculture in the past decade or longer has been large by almost any standards, it has not been large enough, right? This is the quiet stuff out loud. This is market manipulation at its finest. This is a really singular lens that we were looking through agriculture at. We've noted that agriculture's chief need is a reduction of the number of people in agriculture, right? Get rid of you guys, right? Again, I can't imagine anyone putting this out today, targeting any industry like that. Imagine us saying that coders were the biggest wasted resource in American economy and where that would get our conversation. In 1962, 44% of the farm population was below the age of 20. In 1962, 44% of the farm population was below the age of 20. Today, the average age of the farmer is 57 and a half. And at the same time, this organization recognized that we needed long-lasting relief from the overburden of people pressing upon farm incomes. So basically what they're saying is we want the money, we don't want to share, right? They started scholarship funds and goals to move 500,000 people out of rural communities between 1962 and 1965. I think they were pretty successful. They started vocational programs. They said in high schools, vocational training should be changed to emphasize training for expanding industries. Again, the same group recognized the population was doubling in the next 40 years. They got that right, but they saw no need to invest in you and a strong farming and food supply infrastructure. You can still go see this today. In my community here, they have a strong VOTEC program at the high school. Agriculture is not a part of it. It's about automotive repair. It's about home repair. So to repeat, this is the math that they wanted us to work on. Less farmers, more cars, and somehow this was going to be more money for everybody and a stronger economy. We know what this led to. And we did produce a lot of food, and we did produce a lot of things over the last 60 years since this report. But it also got us this, and Sarah talked really well about this, so I'll spend a lot of time repeating this, but that we have the highest obesity rates in the world. We're that bottom line. We have 2 in 5 Americans are obese. We have a healthcare system that spends more money per capita than any other country in the world, almost 40% more than any other country. We have massive food inequity. The dark red spots across our country are where people cannot walk 20 minutes to find a reliable food source. And if you did a map of some of the most fertile soils in the world, they would overlap here. And it's really a picture of how disconnected our soils have become to our food supply. And one of the things that always stops me is having this conversation. Fixing this is a very complicated issue, and there's a lot smarter people than me working on this, but it is one of the reasons we are doing this. What that leads to is 1 in 10 people who are food insecure. If you read the Stockman Grass Farmer, I highly recommend it. Acres U.S.A. as well, obviously. But they have done a nice series to talk about how we can actually change the way we grow and how we repurpose some of the land we're doing for finishing cattle, for grasslands, for conservation to solve this. And they've really created a really compelling case for how we'd make a big dent in this. Farmer wealth was the big promise, right? That farmers, if we just had less farmers, we would have this wealthy I'm not saying the farmers aren't making money. You heard Rick Clark talk earlier today about saving a lot of expenses by moving into regenerative agriculture, and there are ways to make this a lucrative industry. But across the board, that top chart that you see here is actually the representation of the ratio of farm income to total income in the country. For the most part, for the last 60 years, it's gone down. It's gotten a little better in the past, and we hope that trend continues to be a more of an important part of our overall economy. The bottom chart is your reality as a family farmer today, that it takes about $80,000 to $90,000 of off-farm income to actually fund a family farm, right? The middle chart is off-farm income, the right is total income, the left is what you're making on the farm. That's what the adaptive ag program has built as far as an economy, is one that we actually have to rely on industry to then come back and grow our food. And so when we talk about the regenerative industry, we talk about really repairing this segment of the economy. So the realities of the adaptive ag program were less farmers, more cars, and that actually just meant more cars. Just wanted to clear that up. And these economic forces that you're feeling don't means the math doesn't work for you. Again, we're not necessarily trying to say that we want to get rid of all convention and we really just need to replace everything. I'm not sure if I'm there yet. I just need to know that we have no space for you right now with what we're talking about economically, and more space is appearing. You know, Sarah did a wonderful job of building some optimism, and we'll get to that because the way you guys think is really unique. But you know, the fundamental challenge, and this is a quote from Marty Travis at the down at the homes or down at the farm co-op in Illinois. He says, "We are now at risk because our customers are not as dependent on us as we are on them." Right? You're really trying to create healthy food, trying to grow it, build it into local marketplaces, create these circular economies, but there's a lot of options for food, right? I live in an area in Illinois where you still see grocery stores who have healthy food sections in the back where all the organic food is. And I still ask myself, what does that say about the rest of the store, right? We still have a long ways to go to build the customer base as well, and to build the consumer information that we need and the education we need to really build the marketplaces for you guys. So how do we convince them? How do we switch to nonlinear thinking? How do we go from this that we mentioned, right? This constant extraction, the world will constantly supply us, our innovation will constantly get us out of trouble, to this revolving circular economies that continues to feed us, that continues to grow wealth in our rural economies, that decreases obesity, that decreases poverty, and that decreases food scarcity. We luckily have already gone down this road with some of our thinking. This isn't going to be a new path for us. We just have to connect it to agriculture. When we first tried to understand the predator-prey relationships in the 20th century, we looked at it very linearly. A guy named Michael Rosenzweig in 1971 coined the term the paradox of enrichment, right? And he said, okay, when we have more rabbits in the system, that's going to attract more foxes. And we have more foxes, that's going to mean less rabbits. And there's going to be this holistic balance, right? There's just going to be this true symbiotic relationship that's going to continue forever. As they observed nature, they never saw that. It never replicated itself the same way that they thought this paradox of enrichment will work. It was very much thinking it like this, right? It's just going to continue forever. If you take that and map it out a little differently, it becomes a spiral. But either way, you have a very disconnected starting point and ending point. It's not the circle that Sarah showed. It's not the idea of regenerating economies and regenerative thinking. Yet it is also not truly chaotic either, right? We know there's actually logic to what we're doing, yet it's slightly more complicated than this. Researchers looked at it and said, okay, what are we missing, right? And you guys already know this. You're so far ahead of the world. They looked at it and said biodiversity, right? Multiple species stabilizes the cycle, meaning the inedible food in the ecosystem is part of the equation, right? It's not just the fox. It's not just the rabbit. Intelligence. Animals can hide and adapt, right? They can actually learn. We didn't give them enough credit. They can evolve. There's disease. There's volcanoes that erupt. There's earthquakes. There's things that can disrupt an ecosystem that go way beyond the predator and prey cycles. And then there's humans and their toys. If you are a winter sports person or go in the backcountry with your snowshoes or skis, there's a saying you'll hear that says, The mountains are fine and safe until we enter with our toys. And I think there's some truth to that as well when we're farming with nature. Yet it's not this total disjointed ebbs and flows of systems and inputs, right? Again, we're not talking about true chaos that we think about that's unrelated to our reality, right? What we're actually talking about is Edward Lorenz's theory of chaos. You're probably familiar with Jurassic Park, the butterfly theory, right? If you flap your wings here, a tornado happens there. That the present state completely or almost completely determines the future, but does not appear to do so. It's really what we're talking about in regenerative agriculture, is creating long-term effects. And that's when we talk about rethinking our the math we're using. We're talking about long-term effects. It actually adds human health into the equation, rural stability and rural development into the equation. And he understood these things, that nature is not random, right? Einstein's theory of relativity talks about this, that determinism is present, right? What we do today has an impact tomorrow. What happens today is because of what happened yesterday. And what he started to get a picture of was a fractal universe, right? These complex patterns where every part mimics the whole. And he did this by actually putting a bunch of sleds on top of a mountain. And he pushed the sleds down from the same spot in the same direction with the same amount of energy. And when he looked at where they ended up at the bottom of the mountain, they were scattered. And so he mapped them all out and he tried to figure out what was happening there. And what he found was there were these small deviations that he could not quantify for that would change the direction, right? A bump in the snow, a hardness of the surface that changed throughout the day in the sunlight, a wind, right? A tree in the way that would deflect it in multiple directions. He knew that these variations happen in nature, they were happening in our crop systems, and we were not thinking about these things, right? And that's why, Rick's talk is so important, and the way John set this up was so important, and the way Sarah's talk about how we connect all these dots together is so important, because we can't just think of one person or one industry or one system that's going to make this successful. Because as he looked around and he said, how do we present this? He saw, right, DNA, snowflakes, seashells, clouds, ferns looked like hurricanes. A lightning bolt looked like the veins of a leaf. It looked like river deltas, canyons in the Southwest. He was able to understand that these are real patterns that we could determine and we could look at and try to break it out. It's called the Mandelbrot set, if you really wanted to get deep in it. And this is a common two-dimensional representation, but it's not a straight line, right? It's not a linear thinking. It's actually the idea that a very simple formula, which goes into this, can create a very complex answer. And that's really where we are now, is we are trying to untangle a lot of very complicated answers to what we need to do going forward. But I believe that I'm arguing here today that we can apply this picture very directly to how we should be approaching our work with nature, that our ability to work with nature will correlate with our ability to understand the fractal forces at play. So again, we see these everywhere, and you'll see them in your fields, and you'll see them when you do soil analysis as well. So we don't have to make it this complicated, though, when we explain it to everybody, right? You guys are a special bunch. There's a great quote, and people who worked with me, like Sarah in the past, will probably roll their eyes that I've heard this quote before. For the simplicity on the side of complexity, I wouldn't give you a fig, said Oliver Wendell Holmes, a Supreme Court justice. But for the simplicity on the other side of complexity, for that, I would give you anything I have. And I think that's where we can take people, is what we're talking about is healthy people, right? Healthy communities, healthy people, and to show them the data and show them the stories that we're talking about. And anybody who drives through rural America with their eyes open will see them. And we're talking about more community resilience. We're talking about human and environmental health, and we're talking about farmer sustainability. And we're talking about these three really clear goals overall that have so much energy and so much work going into them today, work that wasn't going into them 60 years ago when we started down this path, work that wasn't really even going in 40 years ago or 30 years ago, that it really started very recently. And we're a very small movement so far, but we have to be able to explain what we're doing in ways that will bring other people along and create a regenerative hero in every county, on every farm, and every town, and every business. We're talking about community resilience, tribal organizations and Black farmers. I can't say enough about how resilient those communities are. They've been fundamentally left out of our economy for centuries. And yet here they are today, providing a model for how we move forward. They've got strong marketplaces. We have Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance that are working to break doors down. I won't go through all these groups. Just to highlight Quinn Organic Regenerative Research Institute, that's a new group. Look for Bob Quinn's announcement soon about a very generous donation his family is making into this movement. Kind Harvest, one of our sponsors today, building online communities as well as others listed there. Human Environmental Health, I just want to highlight, Tanyo, one of our sponsors today, organizers. Their founder, Bruce, was one of the early pioneers of this idea that the connection between our food and nature, if we break that connection, we lose far more than we ever realized or could measure. That's the whole idea of this mindset that we're talking about. You should read his book and team's book, Farming in the Presence of Nature. It's a wonderful book. Again, we can learn a lot from, if you don't know Dr. James White, you should look into his research about tillage and chemical interference and how that's destroying massive amounts of life. Aaron Martin's group, connecting aging and gerontology to health with Fresh RX Oklahoma and soil health specifically. We have Fred Provenza talking about the flavor food feedback loop. I got that right. Really trying to connect that sugar's everywhere and we're addicted to it. So it's always in our face. And that's one of the things we're going to have to step away from as we think about how we regenerate our communities and bring healthier food into the food supply. Farmer sustainability. Again, Sarah highlighted philanthropical capital coming in. We really are going to need that. I know this community is fundamentally resistant to asking for help, but there are a lot of people who do. And that's where organizations like Sarah's and the Cradden Institute and Mad Ag and others are doing amazing work to help line that up. And some of the other organizations, some of the carbon work that's going on has a role here, to help us figure this path out with where we're going. So, in summary, the small life and regenerative systems work with the insects, right? We talk about this. They build the plants. Those plants then drive wildlife, right? This wildlife then replants them. We can actually domesticate this wildlife and eat this domesticated wildlife. We actually get a serotonin release when we harvest our gardens and we grow the food. When we grow the food, we can actually create a marketplace that helps create wealth. This wealth can bring us to the community table together. We can repurpose the waste with our animal waste to actually build healthy soil, to re-stimulate the system. And drum roll, I hope, and this is the goal, we'll end up with, right, emptier hospital beds, more energetic people living in thriving communities, and thriving main streets, downtown and rural communities. I would love to see this again. This is so rare and often dependent on a tourism industry, not the ag industry. So nature is not chaos. Take that back to your community. It's not easily measured or understandable either, but it's not chaotic, right? It's just more complex than our own economic systems allow for, right? We have to think a little bit differently about how we measure the benefit of the food we're growing and how we position that in our economy, right? Nature is immune to our desires, but not to our actions. We can make an influence. We can make change happen. You guys are here to do that. You're already doing that. It's amazing work. I think in the records of history, we're going to look at hopefully this time as a pivotal time where we changed our thinking. And we're going to build an agriculture industry that wisely diversifies our food supply, that makes us more resilient as a whole, and that makes us healthier. And just for the record, the family farmer, the small farmer, literally invented the saying for this idea that we can't put our eggs all in one basket, right? There's some wisdom there. You're using different techniques to grow food and work with your customers, right? At Think Regeneration, we like the word different, not better, not cleaner. Well, we know you can measure it through those lenses and find success. We're really wanting to make sure that we have more options for farmers and ranchers that help regenerate communities, and that folks like Kate at the very beginning can find, right? That she can attach herself to that aren't so hard to find. Your goals are different. You're measuring things differently, and they're not just with the Y word overall. So you're leaders. And I love this quote. I'm coming to a close here. When a person, for whatever reason, has the opportunity to lead an extraordinary life, you have no right to keep it to yourself. And that's my challenge to you, is take it back, really build your reason of why you're doing this, and help explain to others why this is so, so important and so vital to really our future and the future of humanity. So I can't really overstate it more than that. So thank you again for your time today. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you and reach you with this message today. Again, you can reach me at ryan@thinkregen.com. Call me on my cell phone. Come to our website, sign up for the newsletter, follow us on LinkedIn and a few other channels. And again, I really look forward to working with all of you and figuring out how we work together. So thanks again.
Thanks, Ryan. Awesome stuff. Lots of thinking differently. I have a specific question from the audience. Do you have any more resources on the connection between Lorenz's nonlinear dynamics and eco-agriculture?
Yeah, let me. I'll put some links in there that will that help. We posted a couple blog pieces about that at thinkregeneration.com, and I can help highlight there as well. Yeah, it's a his book came out in 1993, I think, and it's actually available for free online. If you search that, you can actually read it for free. It's a PDF that you can find in a lot of different places. So they're not trying to hide that information.
Perfect. Okay, and then as we wrap up here, just a more general question, which is, the theme was really like, we need to think differently, right? And so you're a farmer in the audience. You're already thinking a little differently, right? You're here. But we got to think dramatically different about the system. What is one piece of advice for our audience to step into that a little bit more than, say, just attending this awesome event?
It's a really good question. I really look at where's their next tough conversation going to come from. Is it with, are they just getting started and it's with a loved one, a father, somebody that they work with? Is it with their farm manager that they're going to ask them to change something and act for a significant change? Is it with that investment community that you talked about, Sarah, that they're going to go ask for a loan to really fund this? Is it with a media group that they want to get attention to get publicity for their farm? Is it with the customer at the farmer's market to really explain what they're doing? I mean, I think there's so many opportunities to talk about this and really help educate people across the board. And there's so many people leaning in that want to hear about this too right now.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot of momentum. Jump in. Okay, thank you so much, Ryan, for sharing that message with us. Really wonderful to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thank you.